Hello and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast, the show that interviews the best experts in mind, body, spirit, alignment, and health so that you can feel amazing and that you can feel a lot of self-love and love the one in your life. And this is an amazing episode because I'm about to interview Georgena Eggleston, MA, who's a trauma specialist, and she specializes in healing, helping people heal from subtle loss in the family, even from things like suicide and divorce and death and deep grief. And I know that this is not a fun topic, but the thing is that I have personal experience knowing that if we do take the time to fully process through the grief, then there's happiness and harmony and wholeness and purpose and thriving and joy on the other side. And that's what I want for you. So I'm so excited to introduce Georgina. Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Valerie, for having me today.
You're welcome. And of course, I know I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Valerie Green from CoachValerieGreen.com. And so this is just a very near and dear topic to my heart because I'm grieving the loss of my father this year. He passed in January. And so I've gone through my own process with grief, and obviously I'm going through it. And my experience is, at least for me, that when I take the time to feel the feelings in the body, which I know you'll be talking about, and process all the way through such that I then release the the heaviness of the grief and all the other emotions there, then there's appreciation and heart opening and joy for the essence of the person on the other side. And that also brings tears, right? But that's so important because then what's on the other side of that is the sense of inner peace, right? And that's what we're all looking for. And so that's what I want to hear you explain to us, because I know a lot of people, when they feel grief, they think if they feel it, it'll just take them over, right? And then they won't be able to function. So I think that's the first question that I want to introduce you to. What is available on the other side if you process through all your grief?
I love the way you said through. People don't get over grief. They must go through it, Valerie. So right there, that's the thing for your audience to remember.
Yeah, and no, I agree. I mean, because and I want to pause you there. I mean, because people do get over grief if they do the work,
No, they don't
right.
get over it. They only go through it. You can't get over it. Grief is always there. It becomes different.
Oh,
but
okay.
you have to go through it. And that's the thing, is in our language matters as we're talking to grieving people. And really our language for ourselves matters too. You and I both know you will never get over the grief of the loss of your father. You are moving through it. And what that will happen on the other side is you'll be more in touch with your own emotions. You'll realize that when you allow yourself to experience your emotions, you won't be stuck in them forever. You'll also go through the process. Grief brings up the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, longing to be seen, heard, and healed. And so we'll have a better sense of who we are and feel more integrated as we move through this grief. And then the other thing that happens is you'll be able to have created a new relationship with the person, the pet, or the thing that has been lost, and answer the question, who am I now? I've gone through all of this. I am not the same that started back there. Who am I now? So you ask, why do the work? Why wouldn't you do the work?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. And I think the reason that people don't is because it's scary. We think that if we feel the feelings, it's like a black hole. It's going to swallow us up. Right.
Exactly.
So my question about that is, well, what does it mean to process through it? And first of all, what do you mean by grief lives in the body?
All right. I'm so glad you asked that. Grief lives in the body because when we have an extreme, significant loss, what happens is the brain floods the body with chemicals that increases our stress. We feel pulled in and contracted instead of expanded like we are when we're in a relaxed growth state. In the body, we can feel pain in our heart, pain in our stomach, pain in our bones. I remember in my most significant loss, my bones were tired.
Mm-hmm.
And really, healthy grief lasts about 2 years. Can be less. For some people, it's more. Notice I use the word healthy grief. But we
Yeah, and I
feel,
imagine you mean like 2 years from a significant loss,
I
right? Because
do.
I know that
Mm-hmm.
when we were planning for the interview, we also talked about the importance of grieving little daily
Yes,
disappointments too. And, so that
absolutely.
can be processed
Mm-hmm.
through in a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes. But
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a significant relationship like a divorce or a death
Yes.
of someone close to you, I agree. My experience has been about 2 years with my own processes and other people that I've helped, through
Mm-hmm.
the grieving
Mm-hmm.
process as well.
Mm-hmm. So when I say grief lives in the body, it's an opportunity to get out of your mean mind and begin to listen to the body, because the mind can lie and does lie and can be mean, but the body always tells the truth. But
Mm.
what we need to do is develop the capacity and the skills to listen to it. So that's what I
Yeah.
mean.
Mm-hmm.
Grief lives in the body.
Right. Exactly. And I'm so glad that you said that wanted to be asked that question because um I think that what happens, the research by Jill Bolt Taylor, for example, shows that if you feel a feeling for 90 seconds in the body, it changes to something else. But what keeps it going past that 90 seconds is those ruminating thoughts in your head. And that's why I
Yes.
teach people to challenge their limiting beliefs first.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just be with the emotions, it's better to do that, to just feel the sensations, because that's what'll then lead you to what you need. But if you start to feel the sensations and you can't get out of the mean mind, then you have to challenge the limiting beliefs, right? So what do you think about that?
Well, I do know that is the truth. And so when you can realize, oh, in this moment, I'm ruminating, I'm
Mm-hmm.
telling the story over and over again, there's two things you can do. The first is you can go into curiosity and you can say, I'm curious. Why am I choosing this behavior in this moment? And see what comes up as an answer with that curiosity. The second thing you can do is you can think, okay, now I am thinking, but I don't want to. What's happening in my body? And you do a
Mm-hmm.
scan of your body from head to toe, or you may come
Mm-hmm.
from the feet up. Doesn't matter to me. And notice that place in your body that is an
Mm-hmm.
ache or a pain, or you're experiencing a sensation and is calling for attention. Take your attention there, and you're
Yeah.
automatically out of that
Mm-hmm.
ruminating.
Yeah, I mean, unless it comes back, in which case
A-
we have to
Absolutely.
it's
And then we
a
start the process.
practice. That's why I think
Mm-hmm.
meditation, in my opinion, the purpose of meditation is to train the brain to come back to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can do that, then it's a question of, I think people are scared of feeling their feelings because they're scared that the feelings will be too big when they go
Mm-hmm.
into their body. So I have my own methods for addressing that. Of course, I'm curious to hear yours.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, awareness is the first key to change. So I teach people to be aware of what's happening in their body, noticing those aches, those pains, those sensations when the anger comes up, when the sadness comes up, and then to connect to that place in your body where you're feeling it the most, and then to simply sit with it and allow it as you explore it. And I teach a process to do that. But what we just did is aced the feelings, the process. A is awareness, C is connection with curiosity, if you wish, and then to explore. ACE.
Ah, that's a wonderful acronym.
It is.
ACE.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that that's a wonderful thing to teach people,
Mm-hmm. And it's
awareness
simple.
and then curiosity with, you know, hopefully,
Connecting into the body. Mm-hmm.
yes, and hopefully with compassion as well.
Yes, absolutely.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and then exploring, right? It's so true.
Yes.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I love that, and I agree that when people can stay with their unpleasant feelings for long enough, then you get insights, right? Like, what's the next step?
And what I teach people is to recognize where the ache or the pain or the emotion is in the body, to relate to it. What is the size, the color, the temperature, the texture?
Yep.
And then even rub their hands together. If their body says yes, you may touch that grieving shoulder, then do. And then as you're hanging out there, only deeply listening, not intending anything to happen, the intensity will dissipate or be totally released. So the R's are recognize, relate, release.
Right. And you recognize where this place is in your body, and then
Yeah.
you see what it would need in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's the relating to it. See if there's
yeah.
an image that comes up. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting because when I was grieving my son's death, I felt in and out of my body, as so many mothers do when they've had a child die suddenly or had a child die.
Yeah, which
And
I can't even imagine, so much.
and we don't want you to. So
Right.
we don't want you to imagine that. But what happened is with this process is I was working with a professional who said, what are you noticing? And it happened to be my right knee. A beautiful image of a mountain came up, Valerie. And initially, when she said to me, what are you noticing in your right knee? And I said, clouds, dark clouds. Immediately giving voice to those clouds, this pristine amethyst peak came up, and I could feel it in my knee, and it had a granite base. Well, Valerie, 2 years later, actually 4 years later, I was living in Portland, Oregon by then, and on my way to work, going down I-5, and I looked up at Mount Hood in the beauty of the morning, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's the mountain in my knee.
Wow. Spitting image, huh?
Yes. And what was
Amazing.
yes. So what happens is the body has these gifts, these anchors, the guidance for us to move through and beyond our grief.
Exactly. That's certainly been my experience, and in my grieving with different situations and those of my clients. I think what would be helpful is to put this to some examples, like how would you use this, first of all, when you're grieving the loss of something big, like we're talking about, and then
Mm-hmm.
also in regular everyday grievings, like you didn't get what you wanted, and in order to get over it, we have to grieve a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
let's put some examples out there so people can really make it their
Okay.
own.
So remember, we're going to go through it. So let's say you're in the office and you've put in for a promotion and you had the great interview and it felt like it was yours and it was given to your colleague. So what you're
Right.
going to automatically feel is you're going to feel a significant loss
Yeah.
that can take you to, oh, I wasn't good enough.
Yep. I wasn't good
Okay.
enough, or it could take me to anger at the other person. How could they get the job and not me? I'm better qualified, right? So either anger or beating myself up. That's what
Yeah.
my inner critic would do, for sure.
Mm-hmm. hmm hmm So then what you do is you pause and recognize I'm in grief.
Yep. And the thing
And
is, how would people know that? I think that because what I share is just that you know, like you said in the beginning, it's a physical sensation. Your body feels more closed, not open,
that's
right?
right. So I'm imagining when the person hears that somebody else got the job and not them, there's a tightness somewhere.
Oh, totally. I would have this sinking feeling in my chest.
Yes. And for me, it would be a tightness in my stomach. I would feel
Mhm.
like I'd just been kicked in the gut.
Yep.
Okay. Or you had been punched in the heart.
Hmm. I
Okay.
think those are very familiar feelings for people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then we ask, what am I feeling? So we recognize it in your body. What am I feeling? What's the emotion? I'm angry, maybe if I've been kicked in the gut, or I'm so sad that I didn't
Hmm.
get in my
Or
heart
maybe disappointed,
and maybe
or
disappointed.
it's
Mhm.
the I'm not good enough is discouraged, right?
That's right. It is. It
um,
is. So it's important then to have a paper and a pencil and write this down as you go, because this isn't going to be the first time I would imagine that you'll have to process this. And so it'll be interesting to see, okay, I'm recognizing where is it happening in the body? What am I feeling? And now, is there anything else that's coming up? My gut, right in this moment, with that example, feels like it's been twisted into a big, huge knot. It's rope. And so, what did I not have happen? Hello, KNOT, there's the metaphor there. And so, a person must, without fail, grieve on a daily basis so that they can move through and beyond this. And sometimes people will be so shocked that they can't feel anything. And it's Georgina, I'm feeling numb. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. You're in a state of shock.
right.
It can be that shocking to not get the promotion.
Hmm. Well,
And
and you know, something we haven't mentioned yet is that if we haven't grieved from something from the past, you know, a death when we were young, or you know, a betrayal or something like that from a child friend growing up, we close our heart and develop limiting beliefs. When we don't get the promotion, it might bring up all those repressed feelings from the past, right? And then we'll be like, why is that stuff coming up? I should be putting that in the past, right? And it's like it's coming up to be attended to and released. This is an opportunity.
it is. What I always say is that grief is a three-part process. It is navigating the ocean of emotion, that kick in the stomach, that punch to the heart. Then grief brings up the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, longing to be heard and healed. And finally, grief takes us to the question, who am I now? That I didn't get the job. Am I staying on the team, or am I going to go seek a different position? So it's always an opportunity for growth. And that's one of the things, Valerie, that before I leave the planet, I hope that people can have a new lens, a new paradigm for looking at grief. You're not broken by this loss, you're broken open like a seed to grow in awareness.
Yes, that's such a beautiful, beautiful quote. You're not broken by this experience. You're broken open like a seed for growth.
To
That's
grow
such,
in awareness.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And I mean, I love that quote. And I mean, I'm struck by the strength of the word must. People must feel their feelings on a daily basis. So when I hear that word, I get curious about, well, what happens if people do feel their feelings on a daily basis? Then what's possible to go through that grief on a daily basis versus what happens if you don't, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because that's
Mm-hmm.
underneath the must.
It is indeed. And that's pretty strong language from me. because as you've heard me and my tone, there's this, However, what I've seen over and over again, Valerie, is when people do not do their grief work, it puts them at greater risk for physical illness. It puts them at greater risk for being stuck in an emotion and stuck in an emotional place of anger and resentment, and so oftentimes guilt. Because in my introduction, I work with people who have had someone die suddenly and often of suicide. And so
Wow.
there's
Yeah.
the great guilt of, oh, if only. So you
Right.
said, what happens when people do the work? Well, what we know is the brain and the body are resilient. And so by showing up every day for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes, we then can move through and have a very vibrant, vital life. It
Exactly.
Everything becomes more clear and sparkly.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely my experience. I think people don't want to feel the unpleasant feelings because it doesn't feel good. I mean, we're programmed by our biology to move towards pleasure and away from pain, right? The good
Right,
news is we're
absolutely.
not just our animal bodies, right? And if we just move towards pleasure and away from pain, then that leads to addictive patterns that don't really serve us, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that what you're saying is absolutely true. Um, in terms of feeling the feelings. And my experience is that if I'm willing to go all the way through and express the negative emotion, which usually involves me crying, and sometimes I'll like, if I'm angry, I'll like hit a pillow or something.
Mm-hmm.
When I can get it out, that's not the end. Then I have to ask the question of, who am I now? Exactly as you're saying, in order to get that answer of who I am on the other side. And it is healed. It is, I mean, removing this layer of the onion, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, as you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of look at it grief and pleasure. You know how like a feather falls and it falls, to the
Yes.
side. So my
Mm-hmm.
experience is like the more I can give myself permission to feel the sadness or the pain or the anger, the more the rest of my day I can feel pleasure, because that's the way the body works, is
Yeah.
it seeks homeostasis. And therefore, if you're willing to feel like the negative feelings or the unpleasant feelings, as I call them, you can feel more of the positive, pleasant
Mm-hmm.
ones. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like a feather falling, like more grief and then more capacity for joy and pleasure, and more grief and more capacity for joy and pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like what happens to me on a daily basis. If I can feel the grief and move through this part of it, then I'm like, oh my God, I'm receiving all this insight about the wonderful moments and the things I appreciate about my life and the things I have to offer people. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
excited and inspired because I've moved through it. And then, of course, it comes in waves, and then there's another one. But, it's, if we have the courage to process through that layer, then there's more available positive or pleasurable feelings on the other side, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And it was interesting because we started it, with the three-part process. So it's navigating the ocean of emotion. Grief brings up the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, longing to be heard and healed. One of the questions people can ask themselves when they're in that place of sadness or anger is, how old do I feel?
Mm-hmm.
Because just like you said, it brings up the childhood things. And I've had so many people come in grieving, especially the death of their mother. And these are
Mm-hmm.
adult women
Right.
primarily, who have then realized, oh, I'm feeling 4 or 8. My
Mm-hmm.
mommy is
Mm-hmm.
gone. And it's
Yeah.
really important then, because that allows us to have that compassion for ourselves.
Right. I completely agree that if we can ask ourselves, how old does this feeling seem? Then we can turn towards ourselves and treat the part of us that's feeling that way like a child of that age. Because if it's a 4-year-old, because this is all our unconscious mind, right? It's,
It
if,
is.
if it's
Mm-hmm.
a 4-year-old part of us, we would treat that part differently, like, oh honey, come here and let me hold
Yes.
you. Then a teenager part of us that's coming
Mm-hmm.
up might need to just like say what they are feeling and then have me reflect back so they feel gotten,
Yes.
you know? So
Mm-hmm.
I find that my inner parts really are like real children of real ages, and they need different things depending on what age it says they are. I mean, I don't know if it's
That's
like that for
right.
you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And remember, grief breaks us open to grow like a seed, like you said. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're broken open like a seed to
Yeah.
grow in
Yeah.
awareness of my 4-year-old, awareness of my teenage self.
Yeah,
So
totally.
that
I love that.
by moving through grief, the thing that happens on the other side is more of the pieces of us have been seen, heard, and integrated.
Yes, yes, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I like to, because it's a kind of a new concept for people, I think, to talk about more examples.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we talked about the sort of medium example of, and I'm saying medium just, because it's relative, like a light example would be, my husband says something to me today that disappoints me. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of coming right to him and say, I feel disappointed and blah, 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 I would need to feel my feelings first and process them to open my heart so that I can look at what does he need and what do I need. That's a little grieving process,
Yes.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
and then like a larger grieving process is the death of, either a spouse or a beloved family member, like such as
Mm-hmm.
a parent or a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so for those, that's what you're saying might take 2 years if you do it in a healthy way. Um,
Exactly. Yes.
I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to maybe talk about both examples if you have some
Mm-hmm.
available. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
starting with the little one, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's more
Well,
common.
we are hurt in relationship and we heal in relationship. And that's why it's so wonderful to be in that beloved, intimate relationship. And so when that hurt comes up, you have the opportunity to react or respond.
Yep.
And I'm working with people right now who say, oh, I wish I didn't just react in anger.
Yep.
So, what is it that we can do to allow them to step back and say, okay, how old am I feeling in this moment? What feeling am I feeling in this moment? And here's the gem. What would I like to have happen?
Yep.
Because then when we have that buffer time, then we can go back and say, remember when you said da 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 da? I felt attacked and I was feeling XYZ old. And what did you really mean? Tell me more. Because then we can come from that place of being in that center, grounded, loving space, because we've already stopped and taken care of ourselves first.
Exactly.
And for
Exactly.
different couples and people, it's going to take, it could happen in 2 minutes. If you're not the couple that can get into spiral, it could be you just both sit back, you take a breath, and it's like, oh, yeah, that did sound kind of harsh. What I really meant was XYZ. Does that answer your question
Yes,
and give you the
absolutely.
example?
And
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And my husband and I go through that all the time. To pause. What was I feeling? What do I really want? What is he
Mm-hmm.
really feeling? What does he want? Create a win-win.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
um, but
Mm-hmm.
I and most people don't think of that as grieving, but I mean, I do think that feeling our negative, or I don't like to say negative, unpleasant feelings,
Mm-hmm. Well, it was
it
a
can be
loss.
categorized, right, exactly, as
Mm-hmm.
grieving, because you have to
Mm-hmm.
feel them in order to know what you need on the other
Right.
side of it.
So what that was that was an example of a rupture, and that was an example of a repair.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's
So
true.
now let's go to that place where your husband has died. And this was an illness. So there was that anticipatory grief when you finally both realized, okay, we're not going to make it through this. and we've got to say goodbye. And then this is where beliefs come in that are so important, Valerie, about our way of grieving. Because people come to me all the time and they'll really be asking the question, am I doing it right? My husband died. Shouldn't I be helping other grieving widows in our church? And I'm saying, pause. What do you need? Well, I need to feel better. What would better be like? And so then that's where we go with that. And in my grief assessment that I do with clients, there are beliefs about grief. I'll always have this grief. It's selfish for me to do self-care. I should be concerned with the one who's passed. We have all these really unhealthy myths and misunderstandings about grief in our culture. But thankfully, we've had so much grief of late, we're getting better at it.
Yeah, hopefully a lot of us are.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, I love that we're talking about this because it's a morbid topic that most people avoid, and it's a very important one because unless we look at how would I feel when someone significant died, which most people aren't willing to ask themselves, then it's so scary and we live in fear of feeling those feelings. And that's why it's important to feel our feelings on a daily basis so that we get used to feeling our feelings.
Yes.
Right. So that when we experience a larger grief, it can move through us because that process isn't quick. I mean, I anticipate that grieving the passing of my father will take a couple of years, like you said, and it comes in waves, and so it's sadness and anger and then, acceptance and appreciation and, gratitude and love. And then the whole cycle repeats itself,
Exactly. That first day that the widow wakes up and doesn't think of her husband first, and it's an hour into her day and she goes, oh my gosh, I haven't thought of him. There's that belief for many that they've done something wrong. No, this is your brain healing. This is you, that loss moving from foreground to background to create the new relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we could talk
and then
for,
to ask yourself, who am I now? Which when there's a
yes,
significant death, then it's a question for us to take stock of
yes,
how, all the ways that we gave our power away and or all of the ways that we practiced the skills that we wanted and showed up as who we want to be versus maybe we didn't, and what can we learn and how can we grow, So, but we can only ask ourselves those questions when we've processed through the feelings. So I
that's right.
completely agree.
And are aware of the feelings.
Yep.
And allow the feelings and really
Yeah.
appreciate the fact that we are feeling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would say to anyone listening to this who is in that place of deep grief, please don't say, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. I say to my clients over and over again, you're grieving. And everyone grieves in their own way.
Yep. You're grieving. And, on a daily basis, when you're not feeling good, it's important to ask yourself how you're feeling and what you're needing,
Right.
Because, otherwise, there's many books written about how if you don't process your feelings, they get trapped in the body and cause illness.
Yes.
And
mine is one of them.
Yes, exactly. And so tell us more about your book if people are interested in this concept of the new paradigm of grief and they want to learn more about it. Then I know you have a book that you wrote, and then you also have a free gift for people.
Oh, yes. So let's talk about the free gift. Because this is near and dear to my heart. It takes so many great tips and tools and puts them into just a little program where people can access my take on grief right now. And then what do you do when you're overwhelmed? And what do you do then to feel and get yourself into your body?
Mhm.
And the breathing. Everybody's got their own take on
Mhm.
grief. But wouldn't
Mhm.
it be wonderful, Valerie, if every one of us could go from that feeling of overwhelm and anxiety and confusion to, in 1 minute of focused, aware breathing, come back to that place of centeredness? And that's what this free gift, the Resource Reset Library, is intended to do for people.
Oh, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I will put the link to both your book and what's the exact title of your longer book? Because I don't see it here.
The book is on Amazon and it is called A New Morning, Mourning,
Yes, which is a beautiful
Discovering the
name.
Gifts in Grief. And you
Mhm.
notice who I am. I know the challenge. Oh my goodness, did I live there a long time? The lessons that I learned, and then I was able to discern the gifts in grief.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, gosh, it's like we've already gone so long, but I'd love to hear more about your story as well. And I know you talk about that in your book.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
Well,
I um
mm-hmm.
I encourage everybody to get A New Morning. I have not read it yet, but I'm sure that I will this year as I move through
Mm-hmm.
my own process. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Resource Reset Library, which contains 6
Mm-hmm.
topics and tools for people to navigate the ocean of emotion in these chaotic times. I just read it again because I love that sentence. I will put the link below
Good.
this video and then in the show notes for the podcast. So if people
Mm-hmm.
want to learn more about Georgina and her story and her wealth of information that can support you in moving through those unpleasant feelings on a daily basis so that you can really know yourself on a deep level and be ultimately fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
then I encourage you to reach out and get her free gift, the resource library, and check out the A New Morning, because this has just been such a rich topic for me. And I know that I will be practicing all of these things as I go through my process. And um, I know that I know firsthand that these tools really help people. So I really commend you for having this mission in the world.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
When we can change our belief that grief is something we want to avoid to the belief that, okay, it's my turn. Now what?
Yeah.
I'll grow in
Yeah.
awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to talk just another minute about the new paradigm of grief? Just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I know that you have a lot to say about that, and leave people
Well,
on an inspired note.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as we've said, you're not broken by this loss. You're broken open like a seed to grow in awareness. I've spent years and years wondering, why do we have to grieve? And it was like, it's hard and it makes us come alive. And
Mm.
so for us to be aware that just like I moved from being that 8-year-old to being that bratty teen, my mother would say, to being the woman I was in my 30s and 40s, there are all these stages in life. And we don't know with grief when it's going to show up in our life. You can be a 2-year-old whose father dies or a 25-year-old whose mother dies. We don't
Yep.
know. But what it is it's part of the human condition. And
Yeah.
so for us to become more and more aware, what we're going to see and know is the wow of life. We'll be able to see the wonder of life. We'll be able to see the opportunities in life. And when we're willing, oh my
Mm.
goodness, life is so much richer and deeper.
Yay. And I totally agree. And I'm sure we could talk about this for hours.
We could.
I mean, I do want to hear more and I need to get going now. So I just have
Thank you.
thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I hope that everybody checks out Georgina's free resource at least, because
Yes.
I know that we're all going through emotions, not guessing which ones, but times are not easy at the moment for most of us. So if
Mm-hmm.
we could have these resources, then we can thrive.
Yes.
So
Especially the one on overwhelm, and then the two unique ones with feel your feet and
ooh.
the breathing, the cleansing breath. Yeah,
Yeah,
those
I'm
are
gonna
just
check
a
those out
must for
too. I
people.
mean, can't have
Hmm.
enough, can't have too many tools, right?
Exactly. Hmm.
So
That's
on
right.
that note, let's stay inspired and stay inspired through all of our processes together.
Thank you, Valerie.